Most revolutions are remembered by the sound of gunfire. But some are shaped in silence, in the still rooms where ideas are forged by men who cannot walk. Apolinario Mabini never lifted a sword. He never led a cavalry. He couldn't even stand, but he built the philosophical and constitutional backbone of the Philippine Revolution. And for that, he became a threat to empires. Born poor, stricken by polio, paralyzed from the waist down, Mabini could have faded into obscurity, just another forgotten name among the colonized. Instead, he rose to become the chief advisor to Emilio Aguinaldo and the intellectual engine behind the First Philippine Republic. While others fought with arms, Mabini fought with ideas, dangerous ones. Ideas about freedom, sovereignty, and a country governed not by power, but by principles. But his brilliance came at a price. Feared by both Spaniards and Americans, and even distrusted by some of his fellow Filipinos, Mabini's uncompromising vision eventually led to his isolation, exile, and death in poverty. This is not just the story of a paralyzed man who outthought his enemies. It's the story of how a brain in a broken body tried to build a nation, only to watch it crumble in the hands of those who didn't understand what he was really fighting for. Apolinario Mabini was born on July 23, 1864, in Tanawan, Batangas, to a poor family of farmers. His parents couldn't afford luxury, but they raised him with discipline, faith, and an insatiable hunger for learning. Even as a boy, Mabini stood apart, not because of what he had, but because of what he wanted: to know, to understand, to improve the lives of others through knowledge. He excelled in local schools and eventually won a scholarship to the Colegio de San Juan de Letran, where he studied Latin, philosophy, and theology. His professors noticed something rare in him: a razor-sharp mind housed in a quiet, humble demeanor. Later, he entered the University of Santo Tomas to study law. His dream? To serve the people through justice. But in 1896, fate struck cruelly. Mabini contracted polio, rendering him paralyzed from the waist down. In a society where physical ability defined masculinity and leadership, many would have seen this as the end of his potential. Mabini saw it as a beginning. Mabini's paralysis confined his body but unleashed his pen. As the Philippine Revolution erupted in 1896, many assumed Mabini would be a bystander. They were wrong. He began writing essays and manifestos in defense of the revolutionary cause. He denounced the abuses of the Spanish clergy and argued for the right of Filipinos to self-govern. His legal mind gave clarity to the chaotic ideals of revolution. In 1898, after Emilio Aguinaldo returned from exile and declared Philippine independence, he invited Mabini to become his chief advisor. Mabini accepted, despite having to be carried everywhere by hand or chair. Soon, he would become the de facto prime minister of the fledgling republic. His first act? To reject the idea of American protection. While others were fooled by U.S. promises of friendship, Mabini warned Aguinaldo that American imperialism was merely replacing Spanish tyranny. He drafted a series of constitutional documents to build a sovereign, democratic republic, and urged Aguinaldo to centralize authority to protect the nation. The brilliance of Mabini lay not in his words alone, but in his ability to foresee danger. As the First Philippine Republic was formed, many were intoxicated by victory. Spain had surrendered, independence had been declared, but Mabini saw the storm coming. The U.S., he warned, had no intention of giving the Philippines full sovereignty. He opposed the Treaty of Paris, which transferred control of the Philippines from Spain to the U.S. for $20 million. In Mabini's eyes, this was an insult to Filipino sacrifices, a betrayal of the revolution's blood price. He continued to push for a strong constitutional republic. His true decalogue laid out 10 civic commandments for every Filipino, principles that emphasized duty, morality, and love of country. He fought for an ideal, a nation ruled by laws, not by personalities or patronage. But his ideals made him enemies. Many Filipino leaders, craving power or fearing American might, began to distance themselves from Mabini. Some considered him too rigid. Others resented his influence over Aguinaldo. And so, the same revolution he helped shape began to turn against him. In 1899, as war broke out between the Filipinos and Americans, Mabini's warnings were vindicated. But by then, his influence had waned. Aguinaldo had replaced him with Pedro Paterno, a man more amenable to compromise with the Americans. Mabini faded into political exile, no longer carried into the halls of power, but confined to the shadows. Still, he wrote furiously, criticizing the Republic's weaknesses, the egos of its leaders, and the gullibility of those who trusted the United States. In December 1899, he was captured by American forces. He refused to swear allegiance to the United States, so he was imprisoned, first in Manila, then exiled to Guam in 1901. There, on an island far from his people, his body weakened but his mind remained sharp. Letters from Guam show a man still fighting, still hoping, still writing. In 1903, Apolinario Mabini was allowed to return to the Philippines. By then, he was frail, sick, and heartbroken. He finally took an oath of allegiance to the United States, not out of surrender, but in the hope of being allowed to teach and write freely again. Just months later, he died of cholera in Manila, poor, largely abandoned, and misunderstood by the country he tried to serve. He died not with fanfare, but in obscurity. His dream of an independent, sovereign, morally guided Philippines had been buried beneath the rubble of war and colonization. Yet the ideas he planted, about governance, ethics, and dignity, would live on. Today, Mabini is remembered as a genius, a patriot, and a tragic figure. But in truth, he was more than that. He was the conscience of a revolution. Apolinario Mabini's life poses an uncomfortable question. What happens when a nation ignores its wisest mind? He had no army, no wealth, no physical power, and yet, emperors feared his pen. Politicians feared his truth. He exposed the weakness of power that isn't rooted in principle. We like to say knowledge is power. Mabini proved that it could be. But he also showed us that power, without integrity, can silence even the most brilliant minds. He dreamed of a Philippines that would be just, free, and guided by moral duty. Instead, he watched as opportunists bargained with colonizers, and the dream he built collapsed in slow motion. Today, we honor him in coins and textbooks. But do we honor what he stood for? Do we choose principle over politics? Nation over ego? Truth over comfort? The sublime paralytic couldn't walk, but he led. He couldn't fight, but he resisted. He couldn't run, but he still carried the soul of the nation. The question is, did the nation follow him, or just leave him behind?